Early this morning here in India, Dr. David Frawley is joining us. Welcome. Thank you so much. Spencer Critchley is former communications advisor for the Obama campaign. We have Amy Tarkanian. She is chairwoman and a Republican strategist. Deepak Vora, former diplomat. Abhishek Singh Amar is associate professor and director of Asian studies at Hamilton College in New York. Irina is a geopolitical analyst and national security attorney. I'm going to begin with you, Amy. Looking at the bilaterals, there's a lot of emphasis on this bilateral. It's almost being seen as a landmark one. What, according to you, is the big takeaway of this bilateral which was held between President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Modi?
Well, sure. I think it's actually been quite successful so far. And I think one of the biggest takeaways is the fact that President Biden didn't just hold this Quad meeting in the People's House, the White House, but he held it in his own personal home, which I think speaks volumes on the relationship that President Biden has with Prime Minister Modi and the other two countries. I think the fact that, he had them in his home also shows extreme importance on this Quad group and how he wants this to continue and how they've already been thriving in just a short amount of time since it's started. And I think the fact that we now have a new election coming up, this puts more pressure on whoever the next president is to continue these efforts because it's been nothing but positive.
Okay, Spencer, how is, in case if it is Kamala Harris regime which is there to come, I'm just jumping the gun here, but nevertheless, what are her views on the Quad summit and the Quad grouping, I would say?
I think that they are very similar, no doubt, to President Biden's. This is really in the center of, I think, not only President Biden's approach to foreign policy and Kamala Harris's approach to foreign policy, but the typical foreign policy of a Democratic president, and I would say in the past of most Republican presidents, the idea of building these kinds of international alliances built on cooperation and an ever-expanding lattice work, as National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan described it, of these sorts of relationships, which can range from full-on military alliances to trade relationships and technology transfers, I think is absolutely central to maintaining this rules-based international order, which Prime Minister Modi and President Biden and others have been emphasizing, and which I agree is of central importance. One thing that strikes me as it's an obvious point, but I think it gets overlooked sometimes, is if you look at these four nations, nobody's worried about any of these nations attacking each other or trying to seize land from anybody else. And that's not only, I think, a moral way for nations to behave, but it just turns out to be so much smarter. When you approach the world in a spirit of cooperation and mutual benefit and peace, you end up prospering. And nations that behave more aggressively tend to have very few allies, and they rise and fall on their own. And in the end, they do far less well.
Okay, Dr. Frawley, your thoughts on this visit of the Prime Minister? Of course, the Indian diaspora, as we have seen in several parts of the world, whenever the Prime Minister travels, that there is a great degree of excitement. But his words, particularly his opening remarks, become important, where he said that Quad is here to stay, to assist, to partner and complement. I mean, I think that is a roadmap of sorts which is being laid out by India as India hosts the Quad summit in 2025.
Yes, this is a very important event. You have to understand the centrality of the Indian Ocean historically and today for world trade and communication extending through the Pacific, even towards the Persian Gulf and the Middle Eastern region, Red Sea, and so forth. So it's a very important event and shows how India is concerned with the world as a whole, with bringing people together across the seas, with embracing the different leaders of the world, of the free world, and increasing the communication. We need greater communication and diplomacy today. And Modi ji embodies that. He's coming to the United States before a very divisive and difficult election, and yet he's been invited here. And he is also bringing that inner vision so that we look beyond just the outer circumstances to our greater human unity and creating the wisdom and compassion to take us forward. So he brings that whole, you might say, vision of Bharat or India, dharmic vision, yoga, all this recognition of oneself in all beings, so that we can bring that into the political realm as well as the ecological realm and economic realm, and unite the world by the Indian Ocean, which is the same ocean all over the world by different islands. And it's very notable to see Biden embracing Modi because he is towards the end of his term. And this is showing his legacy, both what he has done with Modi in the past and his vision for Modi and India and the future, India's long connection with Japan and its deeper cultural connection, and the many projects they've done in the past, technologically and economically. So this is also this unification of India, Japan, and the United States, and also Australia, which is the huge island continent in the Indo-Pacific Ocean and holds a lot of the future development of humanity uniting East and West. And it's a great inspiration at this very difficult time in human history. There are wars, conflicts, disagreements, challenges, new weapons being released. Here is a vision that's saying, hey, we don't need all that. We need to come together according to our deeper values, which is not just simply democracy as a political statement, but honoring the unity of all human beings. Vedas teach there's only one self in the entire universe. We are all part of one universal family. That is our planetary future. So let's have an inspiration and a unity consciousness. We have to struggle with differences, conflicts, and other outer complications, but we can go beyond that with a higher vision. And Modi brings in that, I would say, transcendent vision that can unite us without us causing to lose anything, give up our differences, but unite in a greater view in which we bring the planet together in the oceans and within us and around us. Not just the Indo-Pacific, but the entire world today needs that. North, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia. Let's develop that vision. Modi is very good at ecology, and this is kind of the political, diplomatic ecology of one humanity and one planet that we need so desperately today.
Yes,
Thank you.
and Dr. Frawley actually put it really beautifully when you said that it's about ecology as much, because the Prime Minister, the Indian Prime Minister in his statement also highlighted that this is not just about nations, it's about people. You know, so the people are centerpiece to all these talks which are taking place. Ambassador Vora, I appreciate your time. Of course, over the past 4 years, the Quad leaders have met together 6 times. In fact, this also includes twice they met virtually. But the foreign ministers have met 8 times in the last 5 years. So there has been a continued engagement, a continuous engagement, if I may say. But what makes this Quad summit, which is, of course, the last one of President Joe Biden, the most significant one, or should I say one of the most significant ones?
Thank you very much, ma'am. Always a pleasure to be on your amazing channel, to listen to you and to the other colleagues whose knowledge is much more than mine. May I begin by saying that I normally have very good hair, but I've surrendered it to the Lord Balaji. It was my personal prayer for the success of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's 9th visit to the United States. You've talked about Quad. Ma'am, give me a moment. We all remember that Quad began with the 2004 tsunami, an act of God. And it has survived and strengthened because of the acts of a godless nation that is known as China. What is Quad headed for? The hard core at the interior is security, and then there's an exoskeleton that prioritizes the development agenda. 4 nations have gotten together and formed this. We were the first 4 responders to the tsunami. India was the first. The rest joined in later. What about the other countries in the region? Ma'am, a region that stretches from Hollywood to Bollywood, in fact, beyond Bollywood to Africa. What do they get? And that explains the developmental issues that Quad has raised, whether it was vaccine Maitri, supply of vaccines to affected nations, or its other health issues, education, financing, infrastructure development, and so on. So there's something for everybody in Quad, in a free, inclusive, open Indo-Pacific. One other point, ma'am, and then I shall hold my peace. We talk of a free and open Indo-Pacific. 500 years ago, when they came to colonize Asia, Africa, Latin America, whoever did, there were no aircraft, no cars, no planes. They came via the sea. Again, recovery, economic recovery, badly impacted by the Chinese virus, has to be through free and open seas. Who's opposing the free and open seas? We know who's doing it. And therefore, the whole thing about Quad, which has so frightened Beijing, they called it the NATO, the Indo-Pacific NATO, and they said it'll dissipate like foam in the sea, etc. But it's going from strength to strength. So my own understanding is exactly what the Prime Minister has said, that we are here to stay. And in, ma'am, the decades to come, you will see Quad assuming a much greater relationship, whether as Quad or Quad Plus or whatever, a greater significance in bringing peace and prosperity that everybody wants across the globe. That is my hope and prayer.
I'm going to come back to you in just a bit, Ambassador. But Abhishek, Amar, one of the takeaways has been this Cancer Moonshot, and which will, of course, focus initially on cervical cancer, which is largely seen as a preventable cancer, and then expand to other regions. And this is largely to do with the Indo-Pacific region. Here, the fact that there is an acknowledgement of almost like a disease which has become like a viral disease, there is that acknowledgement of realities of present times.
Well, I mean, this is not new for Biden, President Biden. I think he has faced personal tragedies. So it was natural for him to extend this, bring this into it. I mean, in last 4 years during his term, he, I think, has spoken innumerable times about fighting cancer, and the amount of money that has been put in cancer research has been tremendous. So I'm glad to see that this is going to extend beyond US to Quad as well. And the fact that in India also we have significant number of cancer patients now. I mean, if you look at the data, recent data, it seems that this disease has become, it's gone far deeper into the countryside as well, and there aren't enough in terms of infrastructure. So I'm glad that this particular initiative has been extended beyond security and others. I think this, if you look at Quad statement today, it seems quite extensive. These countries have been talking about some of these issues. They have experience dealing with each other on these issues. So it's glad to see that they have, it's not just about China. China is their concern, as Ambassador Bora was saying. But I think the fact that they are talking about climate change, they're talking about technologies, they're talking about people-to-people connection, new fellowships, right? That kind of demonstrates that how these things overlap, how these things are entangled, intertwined, and an approach like this, where all these countries are talking, all 4 countries are talking to each other, this initiative would lead to something more concrete and something for future to see.
And cutting edge areas like AI, quantum computing, semiconductors, all that has been included in this joint statement as well. So as you said, this is quite an extensive or exhaustive joint statement which has been issued. Irina, in terms of national security aspects of this joint statement, what has been taken forward from the last one?
Well, I think we should look at several things. One of them is commitment to fighting terrorism. And terrorism is not merely an issue of non-state actors. It's also the issue of state actors who are misusing their force, misusing their militaries towards terrorizing and their neighbors, terrorizing other states, and essentially advancing their geopolitical agenda through fear-based action rather than through partnerships, economy, and integration with their neighbors. And I think there is very much a continuity in what we're seeing from the past Quads in that respect. We're seeing increased collaboration, and I think the technology exchanges, while they have a separate commercial basis, also are clearly linked to this continuity, because the US is strongest when it builds up its allies and helps them succeed. And I think these exchanges, empowering other countries and sharing in best practices, in best available technologies, brings allies closer together. It advances mutual interest as well as mutual shared values, not only short-term geopolitical concerns, but long-term cooperation and long-term closeness far beyond immediate threats and immediate concerns. And this level of cooperation is well integrated, and we're seeing an increase on all levels. We're seeing defense strategy that is increasingly broadened and supported and substantiated by projects like logistics centers, maritime security coordination. We are seeing these counterterrorism efforts. We are seeing that the threats are also becoming more integrated. We are seeing a mixture of state and non-state threats, including in the Indo-Pacific. China is certainly one of the leading concerns, but it is not the only one. Over the past year, we have seen Iran, Houthis, and Somali pirates all make their unfortunate mark on regional security and threaten U.S. interests in international freedom of navigation as much as individual state actors. So all of these things, I think, are comprising a very integrated, multifaceted, and multi-layered security outlook, exchange, and continuity and progress from one Quad meeting to the next at a very fast pace, I would say.
Yes, it's fast paced, certainly, and there is another bilateral which is over now. Prime Minister Modi there putting out a tweet that he had a fruitful meeting with his Japanese counterpart as well. Ambassador Vora, before I slip into a break, I want your opinion on this as well. You know, your thoughts that besides the Quad summit, the Quad meeting which had all the four nations, the heads of the states, the Prime Minister ensuring that several bilaterals on the sidelines as well.
Yes, ma'am, that's a brilliant question. Let me put it to you like this. 2,400 years ago, there was a character called Kautilya, also known as Chanakya, who had said there can be no friendship without self-interest.
Yes.
What is the self-interest of India, for example, and the United States? As far as we are concerned, we need investment and we need access to the best technologies in the world that the United States does have, whether space, quad computing, artificial intelligence, medicine, defense, this, that, and the other. What does the United States want from us? Number one, access to the Indian market, which all the others want. We have a huge market, the biggest in the world, 1.4 billion people. And the second thing they want from us, ma'am, we are the only country in the world, and I'm saying this very slowly, very deliberately, having served both in the United States, left my heart behind that, and in other areas, in other countries in the region. Let me put it to you like this. We are the only country in the universe that can clobber the Chinese when it push comes to shove. We have the military strength, we have the economic strength, we have the political strength, we have the social strength. So this is what America wants from us. This is what we want from America. It's a natural alliance. Ditto Japan. Concluding, I just want to say that the goodwill that Japan has, not many people, and I'm 73 years young and still continuing with diplomacy after 51 years, not many people remember that at the end of the Second World War, when the world forced Japan to pay compensation or reparations or war damages, India was the one country that said, no, we don't want it. The Japanese people can keep their money. They need it for their development. This is still greatly appreciated. Whenever I travel, they say, yes, you stood by us in our moment of difficulty. We shall not forget that.
Absolutely. And I think, I'm looking at the emphasis on infrastructure. One of the pet ideas of Prime Minister Modi in the last 10 years, there has been a great degree of emphasis on infrastructure, which are seen as national assets. We'll try and debate, discuss more on that aspect because, the Quad has gone ahead and announced Quad ports of the future partnership. What will it really be? In fact, there will also be a Quad Regional Ports and Transportation Conference which will be hosted by India in Mumbai. So the emphasis on infrastructure, which is being called as quality infrastructure, is taking the Quad also at the next level. We'll try and discuss more on that with the panelists who are joining me early this morning. Slipping into a short break. Stay with us.
Amity has been ranked among the top universities globally for producing the most employable graduates by the Times Higher Education UK. Yet another testimony to Amity's excellent placement record.
जन कल्याण के लिए संवेदनशील यशस्वी प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी की प्रेरणा एवं माननीय मुख्यमंत्री योगी आदित्यनाथ जी के नेतृत्व में उत्तर प्रदेश के सभी मंडलों में स्थापित किए गए हैं अटल आवासीय विद्यालय। कक्षा 6 से 12 तक निःशुल्क शिक्षा ग्रहण कर रहे हैं श्रमिकों के बच्चे। अटल आवासीय विद्यालयों का संचालन उत्तर प्रदेश बिल्डिंग एंड अदर कंस्ट्रक्शन वर्कर्स वेलफेयर बोर्ड के तहत अटल आवासीय विद्यालय समिति कर रही है। विद्यालयों में एक और नई शिक्षा नीति का समावेश और रुचि एवं क्षमता के अनुसार बच्चों को किया जा रहा है शिक्षित। इन विद्यालयों में निर्माण श्रमिकों और मुख्यमंत्री बाल सेवा योजना से आच्छादित बच्चे सीखते हैं अनुशासन, आत्मनिर्भरता और जीवन कौशल का हुनर। शिक्षा का उपहार कर्मयोगी सरकार।
So it was wonderful to host this event, Samarth, an initiative by Hyundai. Looking forward to more such interactions.
अरे अनूप सो नहीं, अनूप सो नहीं।
सावधान, सतर्क। यस बॉस। तुम दोनों के होते हुए अनूप सो नहीं सकता। क्यों?
क्योंकि अनूप ने सारी सिक्योरिटी की जिम्मेवारी खुद पे ले रखी है।
अनूप को चाहिए अपने घर पे सिक्योर आई माइक एनेबल्ड सीसीटीवी।
सिक्योर आई सीसीटीवी कैमरा एंड सिक्योरिटी सॉल्यूशन।
प्रीमियम स्मार्टफोन्स लोएस्ट प्राइसेस पर ओनली ऑन बिग बिलियन डेज। नाम ही काफी है यार, मैं बताऊं बैकअप हो गया यार, क्यों मेरे पीछे पड़े हो तुम।
I want to soar above the skies and fulfill my responsibilities. With LIC. Paid your LIC premium? On time. दिल की सुनो, LIC चुनो।
LIC हर पल आपके साथ।
कलेजे का टुकड़ा 7 साल में एक पल को दूर नहीं होने दिया।
माँ पानी।
ये लीजिए।
कौन है आप?
केशव अग्रवाल। और ये तुम्हारा नहीं, मेरा बेटा है।
और हम इसे ले जाने आए।
कान्हा।
क्या आज की यशोदा किसी और को ले जाने देगी अपने कान्हा को? मैं दिल तुम धड़कन, सोमवार से शनिवार रात 8:30 बजे शिमारू उमंग पर।
I saw this as some initiative to which plans or which is aimed to bring about a change in the society, a change in the mindset. I would like to empower people with disabilities.
Disability అనేది it's not a defect, it is a special ability.
I pledge to promote inclusivity.
I pledge to change perceptions.
We are Samarth.
We are Samarth.
ग्रीन फ्यूचर, नेट जीरो, ये कोई फैंसी वर्ड्स नहीं है। ये भारत की जरूरत है, ये भारत का कमिटमेंट है, भारत के हर राज्य सरकार का कमिटमेंट है।
The UP government is standing firm to help India keep and meet this commitment. With its immense potential in the ever-growing energy sector, the growth engine of India, UP, is now ready to entice investors at the biggest sourcing show of the state, UP ITS 2024.
सितंबर 2024 में भी एक इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड शो का आयोजन फिर से हम लोग ग्रेटर नोएडा में आयोजित करने जा रहे हैं।
UPPCL and UP NIDA are together constructing and operating the pavilion this year with an area of 10 by 10 meters, specially focusing on the energy sector of UP.
And 4 years since elevating the Quad to a leader-level format, the Quad is more strategically aligned than ever before and is a force for good that delivers real, positive and enduring impact for the Indo-Pacific. This is what the Wilmington Declaration says after the 4th in-person Quad Summit being held in President Joe Biden's hometown and in fact in his house. Let me go back to the guests who are joining us. Spencer Critchley, coming back to you. The point being made here is that Quad is a force for good, more strategically aligned than ever. What makes it so strategically aligned, particularly, you know, it's almost like a road that they have traveled together, all these 4 nations, and they have reached this point where they are confident that further going ahead, it will be about that very trustworthy partnership.
Yes, ideally, and I think that the road ahead can have multiple paths, if I could extend that metaphor, and I think that that is part of the emerging understanding of international relations. And I want to speak with some humility here because I'm on a panel with people who actually have deep experience in this area, and my field is in the communications and politics side of things. But I think that humanity really is very young and very early on its journey overall. And it's only quite recently, really a matter of decades in human history, that I think we've begun to escape from the long, long history of pursuing objectives through the use of force and find workable systems where cooperation moves beyond just a fond hope we all have and actually becomes a practical system for progress. There was a great deal of hope after World War I, and those hopes were largely dashed in many ways. Excuse me. After World War II, there was a great deal of hope with the establishment of the United Nations and with decolonization around the world. And yet we've seen resurgences of nationalistic passions and international
Mr. Critchley,
hostilities.
you can have a sip of water. I'm going to come back to you, sir. Let me bring in, Dr. Frawley now. Dr. Frawley, I'm going to come back to you, Mr. Critchley. You can have water in the meanwhile. Dr. Frawley, the emphasis here is on human rights, the principles of freedom, the rule of law, democratic values, sovereignty and territorial integrity. But at the same time, the declaration, and I'm looking at the declaration, it says very clearly that there is condemnation particularly of illicit missile launches in the region that violate United Nations Security Council resolution. It says that we seek a region where no country dominates and no country is dominated, one where all countries are free from coercion and one can exercise their agency to determine their futures.
Yes, that's a very important point. And we must recognize that we live in a planet. There are many countries. In fact, there are many civilizations. India's civilization is 5,000 years old, and yet it's not understood or even studied in history books in the West. The whole Indo-Pacific region has had many great cultures, monuments, Angkor Wat. It has a great history also. There are indigenous and native peoples that are still flourishing there that also need to be helped. We need to have a democratic view of diplomacy and the world as a whole. We live in a multipolar world with many important centers of learning, economy, tradition, and culture. I also want to raise a certain understanding of India. India has a population of 1/6 of the world. It has more people than Europe and North America put together. It has a greater diversity of languages and cultures, and yet it is a single nation. And it's very important that such a vision is also there through the Quad. In fact, Southeast Asia has many cultural connections, Indochina, Indonesia, and so forth. And we must remember this broader view. We're not just nation states anymore. We are ecologically connected parts of the same earth under the same rules and intelligence of nature. Our technology can bring us together, but it can also separate us if we weaponize the technology rather than turn it into simply a force of human good and sharing. So this is an opportunity to create an oceanic communication through the Indo-Pacific that can reach out to the world as a whole. We have to stop dividing humanity and recognize we are all human beings and bring together our common humanity. We have to have communication even with our enemies, because without that, there is no ground for sharing of ideas and inspirations. So the Quad has a great foundation, a great future, great leaders and motivation. So let it be taken forward with a broader vision. And India has had this view of a universal consciousness, oneself in all beings, humanity as a single family. We live in an ocean of consciousness, not just separate beings. So let's bring back that inspiration of the wisdom of the region as well. Thank you.
And it's about human-centric approach, that it is not just for nations, it's for the people. This is a true essence of our human-centric approach, is what has been said by Prime Minister Modi. And he also said, one earth, one health. Yes, you wanted to make a point. Go ahead, Spencer Crinchley.
Well, let's hope my voice will cooperate. Something seems to be drifting through the air here in California that wants to silence me. Yes, I just wanted to say that, we're still early in our journey. And I think this perhaps picks up from the comments just made. And sometimes it's easy to lose heart. After World War II, as I was saying, of course, the United Nations came together and there was a great deal of hope that perhaps war would be put behind us. And unfortunately, in many ways, the United Nations ends up being toothless, and the Security Council often grinds to a halt because of vetoes. And yet, efforts like the Quad Summit and other international efforts that are based on peace and cooperation and mutual prosperity do continue to be the most successful approach, even when we see wars springing up across the world at this moment. The United States, I think, has made its mistakes over time, but when it's done best is when it has lived up to the values it professes, which is sometimes seen as idealistic, but which I think ends up having great realistic benefits as well. For example, the Marshall Plan approach following World War II, instead of the usual cycle of punishment that has followed wars traditionally. And similarly, I think we're seeing it now here with this Quad Summit relationship, where we have four very different countries in many ways, and yet they can meet on the ground of shared values and a shared commitment to peaceful prosperity.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us this morning here in India, for sharing your thoughts as well. Dr. David Frawley, Spencer Critchley, Amy Takanian, Ambassador Vora, Abhishek, and Irina. Thank you for sharing your views. We are slipping into a short break. This remains our top focus here on NDTV.